How's it going, guys? So, after the real negative last couple of videos that I made, on a more positive note, let's talk about the this great fight that's coming up in the Cruiserweight division for the vacant WBC Interim title. Former WBO champion Marco Huck, he's going to be facing undefeated knockout artist Mairis Briedis from Latvia. This fight's going to be taking place in Germany, where Marco Huck is currently based. This is a really good fight, a really intriguing fight in what I believe, and this is just my opinion, what I believe is boxing's most exciting division, and that's the cruiserweight division. Most of the best fights I've seen over the years have been in the cruiserweight division. I've seen so many exciting fights, exciting matchups. So many tough guys, so many knockout punchers. It's just a stacked division. It really is. I mean, all the title holders in the cruiserweight division are, worthy title holders. They're all heavy-handed. They're all tough. They're all strong. They're all very powerful, and they're all exciting too. There isn't really anybody at the top in that division, anybody lingering around at the top that I would say is not an exciting fighter. It's just a very entertaining division to me. So this fight that's coming up, it's a classic fight of you've got an experienced veteran versus a young, hungry. Well, he's not so young. I believe he's in his 30s, but in terms of boxing years, he's much younger. You've got, like I said, experienced veteran versus a young lion who's on his way up now. Let's talk about Marco Huck to start. I'll break him down, then I'll talk about Briedis. Now, Marco Huck is a fighter that I've been following for a long time. Okay, I've been watching his fights for years, seen several of his fights live. And he's one of these fighters who he's a pit bull in the ring, man. He's a real. Somebody commented on my highlight video I had for Marco Huck and called him a pit bull, and I was thinking to myself, that's exactly right. That's exactly what he's like. He's a pit bull, man. He just gets in there and he just fights. He's just a hard man. He's a real tough, hard, solid dude who comes to fight, and what he lacks in skill, he makes up for in heart and determination and chin and toughness and durability. Just such a hard man. And him being such a hard man and such a fighter is what has gotten him such a big following in Germany, because they like a good fight over there. And he's always entertaining. You always get your money's worth watching him fight. He comes to fight, he lets his hands go. He's a little bit clumsy and a little bit sloppy at times. Makes a lot of mistakes in the ring. Isn't great defensively. Really, sometimes he just completely ignores defense. But he's just such a tough guy. Okay, you're never going to change a fighter like that. He's kind of like, he reminds me of Sakio Bika in a way. He's a guy that you know that he's crude. You know that he's not a skilled boxer or anything. He's a guy he's gonna go in there and he's gonna be in your face all 12 rounds, throwing punches, looking to take your head off. That's the kind of fighter Marco Huck is, man. Just a real rough, tough customer in the ring. Now, he has, but saying that, he has one of the best, and I mean one of the best resumes in boxing. Now, I'm not talking about just how many fights he's won. I'm talking about the kind of competition that he's fought. Off the top of my head, I don't have any. When I make these videos, I don't have any information in front of me. I just make them off the top of my head. And off the top of my head, the guys that Marco Huck has been in the ring with, he's been in the ring with Alexander Povetkin, Steve Cunningham, Victor Ramirez, Ola Afolabi, Krzysztof Glavatsky. I mean, the guy has fought so many top level cruiserweights, and even Povetkin, who was a top level heavyweight. He was the WBA champion at the time, and Marco Huck moved up to fight him. The guy's just been around for so long. He's fought so many world class fighters, so many guys at the top. He's fought Denis Lebedev too. Just so many top level cruiserweights this guy's been in the ring with. He also fought tough customers like Firat Arslan, who has been around for years and who's been a really good fighter over the years. Just such a great resume. Okay, the guy holds the record, or he doesn't hold the record. He has a joint record with Johnny Nelson for the number of cruiserweight title defenses. And it's worth mentioning that in his title reign, he fought way better competition than Johnny Nelson did. I mean, and not only that, but he has the kind of style that doesn't last as long as Johnny Nelson's style. Johnny Nelson was a very negative fighter, a guy who would stay away and look to just pot shot and win decisions. Whereas Marco Huck, like I said, he's a guy who takes risks and he's easy to hit, and yeah, he has the kind of style that really doesn't age well. So I think that Marco Huck almost breaking that record, it was very impressive. Put it that way. I'm much more impressed with his reign as champion than I was with Johnny Nelson. So yeah, Marco Huck. I don't know why. Every time I make a video about Marco Huck, a lot of people seem to, I seem to get a lot of dislikes because I don't know what it is about Huck. A lot of people don't like him. I guess some people just don't like that real rough pitbull type style. Um, I don't know. People don't seem to like Marco Huck from comments that I've seen, but I like the guy. I've been watching him for years, and he's entertaining. And in his last fight, in fact, he fought a guy called Dmitro Kutcher, who was a very tough up and coming cruiserweight contender from Ukraine, and he was actually coming off a first round knockout victory against former champion Enzo Macronelli. And he went in there with Marco Huck, and a lot of people thought he could beat Marco Huck, and I thought Marco Huck won the fight clearly. He completely outboxed the guy, and I felt that Huck showed he showed decent boxing skills in that fight, even though he was facing a guy that was much younger, and I think he was younger anyway, and hit much harder actually, because Dmitro Kutcher is a very hard puncher, and a guy who was on the up and coming. He was the European champion and whatnot, and I thought that Marco Huck, he showed a little bit more ring craft than usual in that fight, and he won a clear decision, and I was quite impressed. That was his last fight. Now, Marco Huck. Let's talk about his opponent, Mairis Briedis. Now, Mairis Briedis, I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys who Mairis Briedis is because he's becoming quite a hot topic at the moment in boxing. Anybody that's caught on to this guy, there seems to be a lot of excitement about him because he's one of these guys that so far has not put a foot wrong in his career. I mean, he has looked absolutely fantastic so far. He completely destroyed Duradola, who was the guy who defeated Dmitry Kudryashov, who was another up and coming cruiserweight puncher who, is still to this day showing a lot of promise. He's another one to watch out for, but he got stopped in 2 rounds by Duradola, and Mairis Briedis completely fucking dominated Duradola. Just completely schooled him. So yeah, Mairis Briedis, he's a very very he's just such a solid fighter. He hasn't. There's not really anything I can criticize. I mean, he does everything right. Fundamentally, he's very good. Solid punching power. Lets his hands go. Comes to fight. Has knocked nearly all of his opponents out. I believe he's had like 20, 21 fights, something like that, and I think he's knocked all but one or two guys out. His last fight was he actually fought here in the UK. He fought on it was the undercard of what was it? Was it Tony Bellu's fight? I think it was Tony Bellu's fight that he had against BJ Flores, and I think that the reason why Briedis was on the undercard was because he wanted to fight Tony Bellew because he was actually the WBC mandatory, so he was hoping to get a fight with Tony Bellew after that. So Simon Vallily, he wasn't really all that. He was just a prospect really. So yeah, I mean a victory over him doesn't mean much. I was much more impressed with his performance against Duradola than I was against his performance for his performance against Vallily. Although he did look okay against Vallily, he broke him down and got the stoppage quite quickly, and yeah, he did a good job, Mairis Briedis. He's a very very he's just solid. He really is. He's a solid, fundamentally solid, strong, powerful, come forward cruiserweight who can actually box. I think against Duradola, when I watched that fight, he showed that he could step back when he needed to in box and fight behind a jab and stuff. And to me, going into this fight, I think that Mairis Briedis is actually a little bit more fundamentally solid than Huck is. Because Huck, like I said, Huck, he's just he's a guy who over the years has gotten used to being a tough guy and a hard man and coming to fight, and he's gotten used to being to not relying on technique and accuracy and just relying on being more of an effort fighter, kind of like a James Kirkland. He puts so much effort into what he does. He's in there to fight and scrap. He's not in there to box. Whereas Briedis, to me, he looks like if he needs to box, if he needs to take a step back, he will do that. That's the kind of fight he seems like to me. He seems like he's a little bit more responsible than Huck, put it that way. So even though Huck is the more experienced veteran here, he's not as responsible a fighter as Mairis Briedis is. Briedis also, so far in his career, has shown decent stamina. I've seen nothing from him to suggest that he doesn't have a good chin. I mean, he can take a shot. Duradola is a big puncher, and he really couldn't hurt Mairis Briedis he couldn't hurt him too badly anyway. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. You know, Mairis Briedis, he also, I forgot to mention too, he has a brutal, devastating knockout victory against Manuel Char, who's a guy who's fought for the heavyweight title a few times. You know, he fought Vitaly Klitschko several years ago, and he's also fought Alexander Povetkin and Alex Leopai and guys like that, Danny Williams and whatnot. Manuel Char, he's a fairly durable heavyweight contender. He's a guy who's a decent victory for any heavyweight contender at this point, and I'm not sure what weight that fight was at. I remember hearing about it, and I watched it on YouTube. I can't remember whether it was at heavyweight or cruiserweight. I'll need to look that up. But so perhaps I don't know. Did Briedis move up to heavyweight for that fight? I totally forgotten. I just don't know. I seen the fight, but I don't know what weight it was at. It was either at cruiserweight or heavyweight. But I know that Manuel Char has fought the majority of his career at heavyweight, so I don't know. But yeah, Mairis Briedis, he's a very good fighter. He's very durable. He's very tough. He hits very hard. If I was to compare him to any of Huck's previous opponents, I guess you could say he's kind of similar to Kutcher, in the sense that he's an up and coming contender who hits very hard and who's very tough, and who's going to have at least in terms of boxing years, he's going to have the youth and energy in this fight because he doesn't have the miles on the clock that Marco Huck has. But he's a little bit more dangerous than most of Huck's title defenses. However, I think that although Huck has faced the top level competition over the years, that may have taken a lot out of him because he has been stopped before. I mean, he was stopped by Glavatsky. He was also stopped in the 12th round by Cunningham. I believe that was Huck's first defeat. The Povetkin fight. Now, I've said this before on several videos. I thought Marco Huck beat Povetkin. I watched the fight live at the time. It was a close fight. It was competitive. Povetkin did come on strong late in the fight, and he did manage to cut Huck and cause him some issues. But I thought that for most of the rounds, Marco Huck was the more active fighter. I thought he landed more punches throughout the fight, and I thought he landed a lot that really bothered Povetkin, and Povetkin looked very tired by the end of that fight. And I think Huck's pitbull style of just coming forward and letting his hands go and then stepping back and firing that right hand over the top, he gave Alexander Povetkin one of the toughest fights. In fact, probably the toughest fight of Povetkin's career at the time. Obviously, Povetkin went on to lose to Klitschko, but you put that one aside, the hardest fight he ever had in his career was against Marco Huck. So it's very commendable, but those kind of fights, they take a lot out of you, and I think that those hard, back and forth brawls that Huck has been in, I do think they've taken a lot out of him. He had a very tough fight back in the day with Victor Ramirez. He won the fight, but it was tough. He took a lot of punches, again just due to his style. He also had four fights with Ola Afolabi. And Ola Afolabi is a very big, very, very difficult to fight cruiserweight who actually was a top sparring partner for the Klitschko brothers at one point. He was actually, I believe he was Vladimir's main sparring partner when he was preparing to face David Haye. So clearly Ola Afolabi is a difficult guy to fight. He's a guy who knows his way around a ring, and Marco Huck has fought him 4 times. He's beaten him 3 times, and 1 time they drew. That was the second fight. It's weird. The first fight, the majority of people felt that Afolabi won, but he never got the decision. They gave it to Huck. But then the second fight, I thought Marco Huck won the second fight clearly. I don't even think it was that close. And they gave the fight a draw. And then the third fight, he won again on points. And then the fourth fight, he managed to stop Afolabi in the 9th round. So, Huck, it's just back and forth fights that the guy's been in. He's been in such hard, fights where he's gone 12 rounds, or he's either been stopped or he's stopped his opponents late and stuff. He's a guy who's had to work very hard for where he is in his career. So a lot of miles on the clock, and that doesn't look good for him going into this fight. Doesn't favour him because Mairis Briedis is like I said, just such a hard puncher, and he's much fresher at this stage. He hasn't had the miles on the clock that Huck's been in, the Huck has had. So he's going to be going into this fight with a big advantage in terms of the fact that he is the much younger and in terms of boxing years, and the much fitter guy at this stage, and doesn't have his reflexes are going to be very sharp, whereas Marco Huck, his reflexes are going to have diminished. And I think that it doesn't look good for Marco Huck. Put it that way, going into this fight now. One thing that you can give Huck in this fight, like I said, is experience. Like, Mairis Briedis, he just can't match Marco Huck for experience. So perhaps this could be a situation where Huck's like, you know what, I've seen this before, and I've been in the ring with better fighters. I mean, the guy's fought Alexander Povetkin, so he might see Mairis Briedis as basically just someone that is just another opponent, just another day at the office for him. Where it's Briedis's it's the biggest night of his career so far, Briedis. So perhaps, you never know. Perhaps Huck might be a little bit more relaxed going into the ring, and that might help him. It might work against him. Who knows? But another thing that might go in Huck's favour is the fact that he will probably have the crowd on his side because the fight is taking place in Germany, and Marco Huck is very well known in Germany. He's a big name there, but I don't think it'll make much of a difference. Mairis Briedis, to me, he's a fighter who's well travelled. I mean, his last fight was in the UK, in front of a hostile crowd, and he's fought many fights overseas. He's from Latvia, but the guy's fought all over the place. I'm sure he's fought in Russia and he's fought in the UK. He's fought in Germany himself, so he knows what it's like to fight in Germany. He's fought there a few times, I'm sure. So, Mairis Briedis, he's not going to have a problem travelling for this fight. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but you never know. Sometimes the crowd being on your side can sway. Sometimes it can sway the judges. Sometimes it can sway a fighter to be more active and whatnot. And you never know, but it's such an interesting one because we just if I'm gonna make a pick, I don't know how good Mairis Briedis is yet. We haven't seen him in the ring with the level of competition that Huck has been in with. But I'm gonna go with my gut feeling on this one, and I'm gonna go with Mairis Briedis to win this fight by a late stoppage or a clear decision. I think a stoppage is actually more likely, because he hits very hard and Huck gets hit. So yeah, I'm gonna go. If you had a gun to my head and forced me to make a pick here, I would go with Mairis Briedis to win the fight by stoppage in the later rounds. And like I said, this fight's going to be for the WBC interim title, and I'm not sure about this, but I believe it's also going to be for the IBO title because Marco Huck is currently the IBO champion. He won that title in his first fight against Afolabi. So let me know what you guys think. If Mairis Briedis wins this fight, I mean, wow, what great fights are there for him, man? I mean, he could face Usyk in a unification, or he could fight Blavatsky or Lebedev in a unification with either of them. So, there's just so many good fights. You got Babet Shumenov out there. His cruiserweight division is buzzing, man. Tony Bellew has moved up, so he's about to get sparked by David Haye. I don't really see him being a big name at cruiserweight anymore because after he gets done over by David Haye, after he gets sparked, big chance he might retire. Maybe he'll come back to cruiserweight for one more fight, but I don't see him fighting the winner of this fight. Certainly not if it's Mairis Briedis. So yeah, but there's some really good fights for the winner of this one. I'm looking forward to this one. It's an exciting fight. It's taking place on, I believe, the 1st of April, in Germany. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.